You see him on the news.
CNN.com contributor, Dean Obeidallah. So, Dean...
Watch him at comedy clubs.
When I say Mecca, do you think of a holy place or an urban clothing line?
Read his articles. And you hear him on the radio. The Dean Obeidallah Show is on live right here on SiriusXM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters of the Resistance. Wednesday, February 20th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. We're live for the next 3 hours. I'm glad you're here with me. A lot to cover. I'm on Twitter. That's really important at Dean Obeidallah, but a lot of other things more important going on. We're going to break down some breaking news that happened a short time ago about a white supremacist terrorist who was a Trump lover, the arrest was made public. I think he was arrested a couple of days ago, but we just learned about that. But first, though, a little humor. Bernie Sanders announced yesterday, and as you might imagine, late-night comedians are loving it because Bernie's a really easy impression to do. So here's first Jimmy Fallon doing a parody as Bernie Sanders last night, doing a parody of Bernie Sanders' announcement. You can't picture it, but Jimmy looks just like Bernie. I mean, they did everything. They made him up perfectly, and it's pretty funny from The Tonight Show last night. Here's clip number 1.
Hello, I'm Bernie Sanders, and I'm yelling for President of the United States. That's right, I'm running and everyone's talking about it. I've been trending all day on the Twitter. Hash brown Bernie Sanders 2020. I came to this decision this morning at 6:20 while eating dinner. Our country faces many problems right now. Human jobs are being replaced by artificial intelligence and robotics, which is very troubling when so many of us still can't figure out what the hell Alexa is.
I can't understand what you are asking.
Alexa, go away!
Alexa, go away. And then Colbert had his take. He didn't do an impression of it. First, he had some fun with, and this is true, where Bernie announced his campaign. Here's clip number 2.
Bernie made his campaign announcement this morning in the most Bernie way possible on Vermont Public Radio. Yeah. Electric. Yay, electric. Boogie. That's a hot booking. After that, he made it official by posting a flyer on his local co-op bulletin board.
And then finally, Colbert played a little clip of Bernie being interviewed on CBS talking about how, and this is completely true, Democrats, many of them, not all of them, have embraced ideas that he championed in 2016, which at the time were seemed radical and way out there. Now they're not only mainstream, but every Democrat just about has checked off the box on it. Here's clip number 3.
Bernie also feels vindicated because the rest of the Democratic candidates are jumping on his 2016 platform.
All of those ideas, people say, oh, Bernie, they're so radical. They are extreme. The American people just won't accept those ideas. Well, you know what's happened in over 3 years? All of those ideas and many more are now part of the political mainstream.
So you're saying the party came your way?
Well, I don't want to say that. I think most people would say that.
I don't want to say that. I think most people would say that. All I want to say is, how you like me now? Kiss my Vermont cheese balls.
So funny stuff there. Laugh as you may, Bernie Sanders, in 24 hours since announcing, raised $5.9 million from 220,000 donors in 24 hours, which is more than the closest opponent. Senator Kamala Harris raised $1.5 million in her first 24 hours. Long way to go in the campaign. On this show, I'm not endorsing anyone. I like everyone as much as possible, as long as they're progressive. If there was a conservative Democrat, I'd have a tough time embracing them. But if you're at least progressive, we'll hear from all the candidates. We'll try to get all of them on this show at some time and have respectful conversations when we do talk about the candidates. So let's talk about the news. Here's my question to you. How many more people does Donald Trump have to radicalize to plot acts of terror or commits acts of violence in his name before Donald Trump himself is charged with a crime? And that's the question I have. And there was some breaking news right before the show, and it's odd because I was going to talk about this issue even without that because of Trump's tweets over the last few days attacking the media, that I was going to make the case that as we get in the heat of 2020, this is going to get worse because some of his supporters, and it's a small number, I can't quantify it, might be moved to commit acts of violence. Obviously, overwhelmingly, Trump supporters are not going to commit acts of violence. They might be snarky online and, say things to us, but they're not going to commit acts of violence. That would be irresponsible to say all of them are going to do that. That's not, and it's not even a teeny number. But I fear it's going to grow, and we're getting more today. So here's what happened today. Donald Trump tweets this morning that he was upset about the New York Times reporting about, and to remind you what the Times reported yesterday was that he had called Matthew Whitaker, the acting/sweating AG at the time, to say what the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney is doing with Michael Cohen is really scaring me. You got to reel them in. Do something. I'm really worried about that. And if that were to happen, it would be obstruction of justice. Now, Trump yesterday said it was not true at all. And then today, he very specifically tweeted about the New York Times. He tweeted, quote, "The New York Times reporting is false. They are a true enemy of the people." So the New York Times, not just the media, the New York Times is the enemy of the people. On Sunday, he tweeted, "The rigged and corrupt media is the enemy of the people." Right before that on Sunday, he tweeted calling for, in his words, against Saturday Night Live, the comedy show, for mocking him, quote, "retribution." He called for retribution against SNL and then added that they should be looked into, Saturday Night Live, for mocking him the way they do. And Alec Baldwin responded on Sunday, tweeting that these attacks by Trump directly against SNL and intertwining us with the enemy of the people, because those tweets were back to back, made him fear for himself and his family. And you might dismiss that as Alec Baldwin just trolling Trump, but that's not true. This is the real world we live in, and it's time our media connect the dots. And I write about this, and I try to talk about it on this show, and every now and then I get to go on cable and talk about it, but they don't want to talk about connecting the dots between Donald Trump and white supremacist terrorism. And before I go through this list, I'll give you a little big picture look here. This is very personal for me because, I suppose just someone covering this, I've had to deal with it first, up close and personal. Because in 2017, I wrote an article for the Daily Beast in mid-2017, before Charlottesville. This was the middle of the summer, not August, saying that Donald Trump has to use the term white supremacist terrorism because there had been 2 or 3 acts of white supremacists who had committed acts of terror, and that time not in Trump's name, they were just white supremacists, committed acts of violence, and Trump, all campaigns like, you got to use radical Islam. If you can't solve it, you don't use the name. Well, my whole article is that, why are you not using the term then white supremacist terrorism? And the response from the Daily Stormer, which is the biggest neo-Nazi publication, the one that Dylan Roof and others have read who committed acts of violence, was to fabricate tweets in my name that I had been involved in the bombing in Manchester. There was the concert bombing, you might recall, in 2017. Now, they couldn't post them on Twitter. They weren't able to do that. But they made them look like real tweets and wrote an article in the Daily Stormer saying that I'm a Muslim, I'm involved in terrorism, and they should confront me and come after me. And I got death threats from that. And I had to alert security here. I had to alert security at Daily Beast. And I'm suing Andrew Anglin and the Daily Stormer in federal court, and we're about to enter judgment, hopefully the next few weeks, against them because they did not respond to the lawsuit. So we're finally going to enter judgment by default. And it's not about a lawsuit. It's about making it clear to Andrew Anglin and Daily Stormer and white supremacists that you're not going to bully minorities. We're not going to be silent because you threaten us. We're going to speak out. My lawsuit was done by lawyers for free because together we were doing this. It's not about getting money. I'm not going to get money from this guy. To make it clear, we're going to stand up to white supremacists, even if Donald Trump won't, and worse, emboldens them. So with that, I'm very sensitive to stories about white supremacy because I know they're there. I know they're growing in number. I know they are dangerous. And I know it's intertwined with Donald Trump. And as a lawyer, I can tell you, what Trump is doing is not yet to the point that you can charge him with radicalizing someone like you could an ISIS recruiter. Because the ISIS recruiter actually tells you to commit acts of violence. Donald Trump, though, brings you to the doorstep of violence and lets you walk through on your own. So he is not criminally responsible for your acts. And that's what's going on now. So you've got Trump again attacking the media. It's been going on for months. And let me remind you of what happened before I get to today. August 2018, Robert Chain, a man you probably don't know his name, you might remember the story. At the time, the Boston Globe did a whole big concerted effort to get a bunch of newspapers to write editorials, op-eds, pushing back against Donald Trump's attacks on the media and to fight for the First Amendment. Well, Robert Chain is a big self-professed Trump supporter, called the Boston Globe in August on 10 different occasions, threatening to shoot employees in the head. Why? And quote from the prosecutors, because he said the treasonous and seditious attacks on Donald Trump. He was doing it in the name of Trump. He's charged. He was indicted on seven federal counts, and his trial is going to be in June. Then, of course, there was the MAGA bomber. We all know the MAGA bomber, Caesar Sayoc, who in October sent 16 explosive devices to CNN, various news agencies, and Democrats. Thankfully, no one was killed. Of course, he is charged, and he's potentially going to be away for the rest of his life. Last week at a Trump rally, we had a BBC reporter, Donald Trump demonizing the press, and one of his young MAGA fans with a MAGA hat on, a young man jumps up and tackles the reporter. I'm going to play the clip. The first part, it's 30 seconds. The first part, it's actually the reporter getting roughed up. He's got his video camera on. You hear a scuffle. That's him. But listen closely to the Trump crowd saying F the press when they see this going on. And then after the guy in the MAGA hat is wrestled by security and being held, and in front of everyone, they all saw what happened. Listen to Trump supporters cheer, let him go. Let him go. Here's clip number 7.
Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans have reached the lowest level in the history of our country.
Does that sound like any political rally you've ever heard before in the United States of America? Where the crowd is screaming, not just F the media, but let him go, and booing security, police, for restraining a young guy in a MAGA hat who had just tackled a reporter in front of all of them. It was so clear Trump actually stopped the speech and watched it. That's why you don't hear Trump speaking over it. Everyone saw it. And that crowd, like an angry mob, not like political fans, not like Republicans or conservatives, like an angry mob cheering, let him go, and booing. That's just in the last 6 months. August, you have the guy arrested for threatening to kill people at the Boston Globe. Then you have 2 months later, you've got the MAGA bomber. Then you've got last week, the reporter, Donald Trump, drumbeat of attacks on the media, enemy of the people for the last year and a half. And then today, a U.S. Coast Guard lieutenant was arrested, a self-identified white nationalist arrested by federal investigators. They uncovered a bunch of weapons and ammunition in his Maryland home. The man's name is Christopher Paul Hasson, or Hasson, Hasson. He called for focused violence. Why? To establish a white homeland. He was obsessed with neo-fascist and Nazi views. Now, you might say, how do I know he's tied to Trump? Because not every white supremacist is tied to Trump. Well, according to prosecutors, and they had a spreadsheet of his internet inquiries, included, what if Trump illegally impeached? Another, civil war if Trump impeached. So we're not speculating that he loved Trump. We're not speculating that he'd be willing to commit an act of violence for Trump. His own internet searches that the government was able to get show us that. On his plan to who to kill, who does it include? Nancy Pelosi, AOC, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who's not like a really well-known guy, except Donald Trump has demonized Senator Richard Blumenthal over and over and over for his service in the Marines, but he didn't go to Vietnam. So he over-exaggerated at one point. That's what you have. You also have people in the media, like Joe Scarborough on this list. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. About Richard Blumenthal, he called him Senator Blumen Jew. So this guy's a white supremacist, anti-Semite. And they found he had a 1,500-page manifesto of right-wing terrorist Anders Breivik, who in 2011 killed 77 people in Norway. And the reason I'm very familiar with Anders Breivik, because he was an anti-Muslim bigot who was killing people in the hopes to stop the browning of Norway. But he killed white people. But he was trying to bring attention to the browning of Norway because Muslims and immigrants were coming there. He wanted to stop them. And Anders Breivik cited in his own manifesto the leading anti-Muslim bigots in America, like Pam Geller, Robert Spencer, and others. So this all comes home for me. Like, this is something I've been studying and writing about for years. And here we are. Authorities seized 15 firearms, including several long guns and rifles, more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition. Some of the media is reporting, because the guy did say in some of his writings, he wanted to kill everyone. You could focus on that if you want and be intellectually dishonest, or you can focus on his actual names on his list, which were Democrats and people in the media, and they line up perfectly to the people that Donald Trump is railed against. And this is a Trump supporter, so we don't have to even speculate, is he a Trump supporter? This is where we are right now in America. This is where we are. And today, the Southern Poverty Law Center came out with their new list of hate groups, and guess what exploded in growth in the last year? White supremacist hate groups. This is the world we live in, and here's the worst part of all of this. We are just heading into 2020 election. I recall in 2014, I was on a panel of Muslim activists. Some work in the media, some were activists on different levels. And one who's an expert on sociology and on studying the media and studying anti-Muslim bigotry warned in 2014, before the campaign in 2016, that her extensive research has found that it's around presidential elections when you see spikes in attacks on minority groups in contested elections, like really hotly contested elections. That was 2014. I'm like, why would that be? She goes, that's what happens. People get more and more passionate and out there. And sure enough, 2016, we had Donald Trump run 2015. We see a big spike in hate crimes. So this is where we are right now. Can Donald Trump be criminally prosecuted for saying the enemy of the people is the media over and over and over? The New York Times is the enemy of the people, demonizing members of the Democratic Party. No, he can't. As a lawyer, I can tell you he can't. The only way under the Brandenburg test, which is a famous Supreme Court decision, it has to be immediate, and he really has to be telling them, like if Donald Trump at a rally said, I want you to go out and kill Nancy Pelosi, and someone did that, he can be charged. And he said now, and in a way that was clearly not joking, but clearly intentional, and said it with seriousness. That's the only way. What Trump is doing, though, is so vile and despicable, in that he understands he can't be charged with a crime. But he doesn't care if people get hurt. He doesn't care if journalists on the left die. His goal is that we self-censor, all of us, that we all stop commenting. We don't tell jokes about him. We don't write articles about him. We don't comment on TV in a negative way, that we self-censor out of fear. That's the first step to losing freedom of expression. It's not through a coup. It's not through laws. It's self-censorship. And that's what Trump wants. So he doesn't care. I'm an acceptable loss. You're an acceptable loss. Everyone listening, we are all acceptable losses to Donald Trump to stay in power. Donald Trump will do anything to stay in power. He's going to incite more violence. I'm telling you, as we sit here February 20th, 2019, history tells us we are going to see a rash of political violence in the 2020 election season. And there might be a counterbalance. There might be a reaction. There might be right-wing violence. And then, sadly, some on the left, way on the far left, might respond. I don't think it'll be a civil war, but we're going to see violence. I hope the police are able to stop it before it happens. I hope no one gets hurt badly, but we're going to see political violence. And Donald Trump doesn't care. When he tweets today, after in the last few months, one reporter got beat up right in front of him, the MAGA bomber, and the guy in August arrested. He knows that, and there's probably others we don't even see in the media who are MAGA lovers targeting the media. And Trump, again, today, New York Times is the enemy of the people. He doesn't care. And this is where we live. So let's take a break. You're my guest at the top of the hour. I'd love to hear from you on this. 866-997-4748. Do you think we're going to see more violence going through 2020 election? Are you concerned about it? Do you think it might not be much? I'm all ears. I'd like to hear. It's not going to be as bad as I think. So walk me off the ledge. I'm happy to. But I think that history is going to tell us we're going to look back after 2020 and be surprised and stunned and infuriated and heartbroken what we see in this country. And I'm just warning people. And I say that with no joy. I don't say that to be provocative. I'm not trying to be the, right wing, the left version of Alex Jones or something. I'm telling you from history and what I'm seeing here, this is where we're going. So I'd love to hear from you. 866-997-4748 right here on the Dean Obeidallah Show.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
My slogan for Trump in 2020, Trump for prison 2020.
SiriusXM Progress.